All politics is identity politics. All right, everybody, I'm Kevin DeAnna. Welcome to Identity Politics, and there's a lot of stuff happening this week, so let's get right into it. Marco Rubio, until recently acting archivist of the United States, former director of the U.S. Agency of International Development, caudillo of Venezuela, archregent of Cuba, national security advisor, and of course, Secretary of State, recently spoke to the European Union in the kind of speech that we basically shrug at now, but we'd call a revolution 10 years ago. Speaking of the end of the Cold War, he spoke of a civilization once again being made whole. He condemned the end of history, mocked the idea that the rules-based global order, which he called an overused term, would now replace the national interest, and scoffed at the idea that we would now live in a world without borders, where everyone becomes a citizen of the world. Now, this is pretty different from what we've heard from American leaders for a very long time, and this is Marco Rubio. This is the guy we all called Little Marco in 2016. In fact, he sounded very similar to what Donald Trump was saying during the first presidential run, arguably the more insurgent presidential run. And one quote that is frankly unimaginable from any Republican before Donald Trump is, quote, "In this delusion of the end of history, that is, we embraced a dogmatic vision of free and unfettered trade, even as some nations protected their economies and subsidized their companies to systematically undercut ours, shuttering our plants, resulting in large parts of our societies being deindustrialized, shipping millions of working and middle-class jobs overseas, and handing control of our critical supply chains to both adversaries and rivals," unquote. This is a Republican saying this. This is Marco Rubio. This is the establishment's favorite for so long. Here he is bashing free trade. And more importantly, here's what he has to say about mass immigration.
To both adversaries and rivals. We increasingly outsourced our sovereignty to international institutions while many nations invested in massive welfare states at the cost of maintaining the ability to defend themselves. This, even as other countries have invested in the most rapid military buildup in all of human history and have not hesitated to use hard power to pursue their own interests. To appease a climate cult, we have imposed energy policies on ourselves that are impoverishing our people, even as our competitors exploit oil and coal and natural gas and anything else, not just to power their economies, but to use as leverage against our own. And in a pursuit of a world without borders, we opened our doors to an unprecedented wave of mass migration that threatens the cohesion of our societies, the continuity of our culture, and the future of our people. We made these mistakes together. And now, together, we owe it to our people to face those facts and to move forward, to rebuild.
This is different. And then a little later, he says something, frankly, not too different from what I would say. Quote, "We are part of one civilization, Western civilization. We are bound to one another by the deepest bonds that nations could share, forged by centuries of shared history, Christian faith, culture, heritage, language, ancestry, and the sacrifices our forefathers made together for the common civilization to which we have fallen heir," unquote. Culture, heritage, ancestry. This is pretty good. And on immigration, he says, quote, "We must also gain control of our national borders, controlling who and how many people enter our countries. This is not an expression of xenophobia. It is not hate. It is a fundamental act of national sovereignty. And the failure to do so is not just an abdication of one of our most basic duties owed to our people. It is an urgent threat to the fabric of our societies and the survival of our civilization itself," unquote. Now, this is no small thing that the Secretary of State, a guy who was notoriously part of the Gang of Eight, that tried to pass amnesty during his Senate career, is now talking about immigration as a threat to the survival of civilization itself. And in terms of something that I wouldn't phrase really any differently, he says,
"Acting together in this way, we will not just help recover a sane foreign policy. It will restore to us a clearer sense of ourselves. It will restore a place in the world. And in so doing, it will rebuke and deter the forces of civilizational erasure that today menace both America and Europe alike. So in a time of headlines heralding the end of the transatlantic era, let it be known and clear to all that this is neither our goal nor our wish. Because for us Americans, our home may be in the Western Hemisphere, but we will always be a child of Europe.
I'm not trying to just feed lines to hostile reporters watching this or something like that, but frankly, this is not too dissimilar from what Jared Taylor has called for in terms of a world brotherhood of Europeans. But I know what you're thinking here. Two problems. One, problem of just being co-opted. This is Marco Rubio, right? I mean, this is just rhetoric. Are we such cheap dates that, wow, this is so great, guys? What does it mean in terms of policy? Oldest debate on the right currently, frankly. Do we have any engagement with the system at all? Is a step in our direction seen as a good thing, or is it an evil trick to try to steal our support? And more importantly, the second biggest problem, what word is missing from all of this? What is the one word that when you think of Western civilization is essential? What's the one characteristic that really defines the West? What's the one thing, the physical descriptor, if you will, that identifies, that makes a man of the West? That's right. White. The word white does not appear in the speech. Now, I'm not naive or insane. I don't think Marco Rubio, of all people, is going to go in there and start calling to save the white race and reading between the lines about how immigration threatens civilizational erasure. I mean, all right, come on. Yes, co-option, fine. But until we have one explicitly pro-white guy elected anywhere in America, even on a city council, sorry, this is the best we're going to get. But it does tell you something, doesn't it? Our rulers can talk about the threat of civilizational erasure, very apocalyptic themes, things that people would be freaking out about not too long ago, but we can't even call our people by our name. And until we can do that, what, fundamentally, do we really expect to change? As one final note, it's kind of interesting that Marco Rubio himself claimed in so many words to be a son of Europe. He was praising all the different nations that have made up America. He praised the English as the founders of the country, the Scots-Irish for taming the frontier. He wasn't condemning them for fighting Indians, certainly. The Germans for settling the Midwest, the Dutch for New Amsterdam, Spain for inventing the cowboy archetype that was synonymous with the American West. We'll come back to that. And then he said this.
And you know that in the year that my country was founded, Lorenzo and Catalina Giraldi lived in Casal Monferrato in the Kingdom of Piedmont, Sardinia. And Jose and Manuel Arena lived in Sevilla, Spain. I don't know what, if anything, they knew about the 13 colonies which had gained their independence from the British Empire. But here's what I'm certain of. They could have never imagined that 250 years later, one of their direct descendants would be back here today on this continent as the chief diplomat of that infant nation. And yet here I am, reminded by my own story that both our histories and our fates will always be linked.
I mean, again, I get it. Yeah, it's Marco Rubio of all people. I'm not trying to gas him up, but think about this for a second. When's the last time you heard an American politician praising European ancestry as something core to both his identity and the identity of the country, and a reason for the eternal links between Europe and America? And not some stupid thing on St. Patrick's Day where it's like, did you know I'm an East Irish or whatever else? No, this is core to who we are. And perhaps more importantly, when's the last time you heard a Hispanic politician historically pro-immigration, at least before 2016, talking about his ethnic identity, not in ha ha ha, we were oppressed, we pushed our way to America, we're taking over, not in the sense that everybody's a potential American, that America has no core identity, but instead saying, my ancestors were aristocrats from the Kingdom of Piedmont, Sardinia, and I'm a son of Europe who has returned home. I mean, yes, I get it. It's just talk, but no, it's not enough. No, but this is pretty different. Contrast that to what Barack Obama wrote when he visited Europe. This is from his book, Dreams from My Father, A Story of Race and Inheritance. Same guy who everybody told us was post-racial, by the way. And he said, quote, "It wasn't that Europe wasn't beautiful. Everything was just as I imagined it. It just wasn't mine. It felt as if I was living out someone else's romance. The incompleteness of my own history stood between me and the sights that I saw like a hard pane of glass," unquote. This is what I'm talking about when I say nobody really assimilates. You're part of it or you're not. You're part of the West or you're not, and it's inherent. But contrast what Rubio was saying. to what another American in quotes here, said at this conference in Munich or speaking at other sites in Germany. And this is Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Sandy during her affluent adolescence in Yorktown, but now an oppressed brown girl straight out of the barrios.
There's a very big difference between whiteness and national, like your actual culture, right? Whiteness is an imaginary thing. Being German is real. Being Italian is real. Being English. These are rich cultural heritages that are based on values, and they are so much a part of what make our cultures and our societies what they are.
Now, isn't it funny how this always goes? Identity, remember, is not just what you are biologically, but how power views you. So what matters when you apply for a job, when you apply to a college, when you're dealing with law enforcement, when you're dealing with media and the journos are deciding how to frame a story, when a politician is deciding whether to pander to you, when a government is deciding whether to subsidize your community or not? What is the one thing that really matters? It's whether you're white or not. What is the left defined by other than complaints about white supremacy, white racism, white privilege, white settler colonialism, and on and on and on? And yet now we're told whiteness doesn't exist, at least not as a culture. It's not real. It's not a positive identity, but it is something to be attacked. So again, ZOC, whiteness isn't real, but also white privilege is ever present and everywhere, and you benefit from it.
And if you can't make the first basic step to say, listen, if you are in this country and you are not Black, you benefit from a system of white supremacy. It has nothing to do with the hate in your heart. It's like, were you born in the Bronx? You were born in the Bronx. Were you born in Westchester? You were born in Westchester. That's not your fault. It doesn't have anything to do with your character. It's just the conditions upon with which you were born. And by the way, even within the Black community, it's colorism. Even within the Latino community, colorism. That's right. Whether you're light skinned, your tone, all of this
your hair
is part
texture.
of the conversation right now. Huh?
Your hair texture.
Yep. Your hair texture, all of it. And so it's, the first step that people say, oh, well, I don't consciously do anything. You don't have to consciously do anything. Like we're in it, man. We are
you do have to consciously be working to unravel it. And if you're not, and if you're impeding progress, you are guilty as those that were oppressing us, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're impeding progress and not acknowledging your privilege.
And break down the contradictions of this. Whiteness isn't real, it's not a real thing, but you can also tell perfectly who's white or who's not, who's Black or who's not, who benefits from the system. That's inherent, but it also doesn't exist. Who is us and them? Everyone else can tell this. This whole system of white supremacy wouldn't work if race didn't exist, but of course it does, but we have to pretend it doesn't. And of course, if everything really was dominated by white supremacy, we really wouldn't be dealing with her, would we? We wouldn't be dealing with any of these problems. I mean, really, what problems would we even have? I digress. Go back to what she said in Germany. She said, well, being German is a real thing. Being Italian is a real thing. So, we're endorsing 19th century nationalism and the idea that every people deserves a fatherland. No, that's not what she's really saying. Because what else does she say? She says, well, being German, being Italian, this too is defined by values. So really, you can't be white, but you can be German, but also you can't really be German because it's just values. It's just vibes, I guess. And what do these people say the values are? When you have a Western leader and you say, well, what are the values that define us? What do they say? Fairness and tolerance and democracy and openness, which is to say just nothing. So actually everybody can be German. This is complete nonsense. Fairness, tolerance, democracy, openness, universal aspirations. This is not what it is to be part of a nation. This is certainly not what it is to be Italian. And of course, we also know she doesn't even believe any of this. If whiteness is artificial, but national identities are real, then frankly, if there's a group of 5 white guys, one's English, one's French, one's German, one's Dutch, one's Swiss, that's diversity, right? If she believes what she's saying. But of course, in the eyes of any established power, any law, any meaningful social reality, it's not diverse at all. It's just some white guys. And that must be targeted for enrichment. And of course, if you say, oh, national cultures are real, I'm English. National cultures are real. Can I preserve my heritage? Can I preserve my culture? Well, now the deconstruction comes in again. What do you mean you're English? What is it to be English? Because first it was Celts, and then the Romans came, and then the Angles and the Saxons, and then the Danes, and then the Normans. So actually, you're just a hodgepodge of random groups, and it's not a real thing. So the goalpost gets shifted if you try to mobilize on national grounds too. You don't have to take any of this seriously. They don't. They're just trying to give you reasons why you're not allowed to take your own side. No one does this with groups that they actually value. But AOC also directly responded to Rubio's speech, and this is what she says.
You are starting to see the ascent of the right, even in places like Munich. Marco Rubio's speech was a pure appeal to Western culture. My favorite part was when he said that American cowboys came from Spain.
I thought they came from Winnetou, but
I believe the Mexicans and descendants of African enslaved peoples would like to have a word on that. But I think it's also important to note how thin that foundation is. Culture is changing. Culture always changed. Culture for the entire history of human civilization has been a fluid, evolving thing that is a response to the conditions that we live in. And so they want to take this mantle of culture. At the end of the day, though, it is very thin. And so the response that we have to have is, again, it's material, it's class-based, it's common interest. There was certainly more openness to what I was saying than probably there would be in years past. We can't underestimate the appeal of going back to these well-worn grooves. A lot of what we talk about when we talk about a class-based internationalist perspective also means ending the hypocrisy towards the global South.
First thing, of course, notice Western culture in scare quotes. That itself tells you an awful lot. This is the problem. And of course, you often see these things. If whites don't exist, well, then Western culture also doesn't exist. That's a very reasonable thing to hold. And this is what the mainstream says. This is what any academic will tell you. Conservatives will say things like, well, Western culture is universal, anyone can be part of the West, but frankly, the woke are more correct than the mainstream and they know the score. Western man is white man. And if whites don't exist, Western civilization doesn't exist. And if whiteness is only to be defined in negative terms, then Western civilization can only be defined in negative terms. And if Western man doesn't really exist, if it's not a real identity, then Western man, which is to say white man, has to be defined as having no accomplishments, no civilizational contributions. This is the overall narrative that shapes everything at this point. You never did anything. You have no real identity. You have nothing to be proud of. Now you look at somebody like AOC, her whole life, her whole career is built on this kind of resentful non-white identity politics. But now that we're talking about Western culture, culture's thin. It doesn't really exist. Culture isn't even really a thing. Everything is just changing. Whoa, no one knows anything. What do words even mean? Everything is just material conditions. Does that mean non-white racial identity politics is invalid? Because we should just be talking about class? No, of course not. That's very different, you see. That's a response to white privilege, the social and political system created by the people that don't actually exist. And therefore it's okay. Like, this is where we're at. And ultimately, of course, what's the overall narrative you get in everything from pop culture to academia? You are surrounded by the remnants of these Western culture. You can see them. Buildings, monuments that haven't torn down yet. We are basically savages squatting in the ruins of a superior civilization. At some level, we know this. There's nothing more radicalizing than seeing the way our cities used to be. People did, in fact, live better than we live now. We see that people were able to build certain things and create certain things that we either can't or won't build now. You can't deny this. So what is the narrative? The West used to do these amazing things. Now we can't. What is the narrative? Actually, non-whites did all that. See, you think you went to the moon, but you're wrong, because actually it was some sassy black women. You think you built this high European culture that everybody admires and wants to be a part of. Actually, the aristocracy was all black. The white supremacists lied to you. You may say, well, look at the medieval world. Aren't there all these inspiring heroes? There's like Joan of Arc or something. What a great role model. Actually, she was black. You just don't know that. The white nationalists lied to you. And the ancient world, you admire these people? Well, actually, they were all black too. Cleopatra was black. So, cowboys, they came from Spain? No, they didn't. No, of course not. Rubio's wrong. Only people of color who actually exist, and you don't. Only people of color have actual cultural accomplishments because they actually exist, and you don't. They have a culture. You don't. You owe everything to them. Now, in reality, if you want to talk about where cowboys came from, you probably want to start with who brought horses to the New World. Well, we know exactly when they came. We even know what the horses were called. Hernan Cortez, you know, the guy who has the same last name as AOC is, only with an S instead of a Z. She probably doesn't know that. Brought 16 horses to the New World in 1519. So you want to talk about cowboy culture, it's because Cortez brought these horses. And he used them to conquer the Aztecs. And here's a picture of one. We know the horse's name. The horse's name was Morzillo. After the horse's death, the Itza people deified him. Deified the horse, not Cortez. They called him Tizminachek and regarded him as a thunder god. So you want to talk about like cultural victory here, with apologies to AOC. It's not just that whites brought the animals here. It's that the Nons worshipped our animals as gods because it was like nothing they had ever seen. That's a culture. Now, AOC is obviously going to run for president, and I think she's actually going to be formidable because it's going to be like Obama in 2008 with the media narratives. It's hope, it's change, we're fighting inequality, we're going to stick it to Trump, and compare the streamers and the influencers on their side to ours. Like theirs are running for Congress themselves or working to get guys that they like in power. Ours are telling us that if you do nothing and just kind of accuse random people of being pedophiles and stuff, we magically get to win. Well, there is no political solution. Okay, well, then you're just going to be ruled by those who impose a political solution. Every solution is a political solution. You just don't want to do it because you're an entertainer. One side is serious. One side is not. So in Chicago, you have I'm going to butcher this name, Kat Abu Ghazaheli, who is Palestinian. She is a streamer. You've heard of her. You recognize her. She's running for Congress. And frankly, I wouldn't count her out. Precisely because I can't pronounce her last name. That's quite an asset these days. And after Zohan Mandami, after AOC herself, who'd be foolish enough to count her out? I mean, this sort of anti-white race communism is the winning message. And if you just kind of lump in some stuff about class and, well, the rich and inequality, that is the way to go forward. You're guaranteed positive media coverage. You promise everything to everyone. You tactically take advantage of whatever non-white heritage you have. Again, in this girl's case, she's Palestinian. Yeah, you're going to get the nomination. You're probably going to win. AOC pioneered this. You're nuts if you don't think she can win. You're nuts if you don't think she can be president. Now, in terms of substance, AOC has no idea what she's doing. She was asked a very direct question about whether America should defend Taiwan if China invades. It's a yes or no question. This is what she says.
Would and should the U.S. actually commit U.S. troops to defend Taiwan if China were to move?
I think that this is such a, I think that this is this is, of course, a very long-standing policy of the United States. And I think what we are hoping for is that we want to make sure that we never get to that point. And we want to make sure that we are moving in all of our economic research and our global positions to avoid any such confrontation and for that question to even arise.
Okay, she has no idea what she's doing, but who cares? China is a serious country. We are not. Our political system basically makes it impossible for us to have any kind of real policy or strategy. We are not sovereign. Not just because certain cliques dominate our foreign policy, but because we are internally colonized by millions upon millions of hostile, resentful, non-white dependents who were imported precisely because they are hostile, resentful, non-white dependents. They should not be here. They have nothing to contribute, and yet that's why they are here. And at some point, either they go or the country goes. It is that brutally simple. Now, I know what you're thinking in terms of Marco Rubio and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. How is one framing himself as the defender of Western man, a scion of European aristocracy, the defender of our common civilization, looks like this, and then the other is the champion of the global South, rising up to take the world back from the evil European colonialists? One picture is actually not all that dissimilar from the other. But race is real, right? Like, it's a biological reality. We don't need to go over racial differences in order to relitigate this point, but we have this category of Hispanics, which is pretty useless in my view. Hispanics can be of any race, for example. This is not my definition. This is the census's definition. So you have this absurd situation right now where if the heir to the Spanish throne, and this is her, for whatever reason, decided to move to America, she could claim affirmative action. The Office of Management and Budget defines Hispanic or Latino as a person of Cuban, Mexican, Puerto Rican, South or Central American, or other Spanish culture or origin regardless of race, unquote. So she's Hispanic, but a guy of mixed American Indian and European heritage from, say, Brazil would not be Hispanic because they don't speak Spanish there. Obviously, this is not very helpful. How did we end up here? Well, NPR had this very triumphal reporting back in 2017 talking about how the Hispanic category was added. Who put the Hispanic in Hispanic Heritage Month? And they did an interview with this woman, Christina Mora, author of the book Making Hispanics, How Activists, Bureaucrats, and Media Constructed a New American. What she says, interview asks the obvious question, how did this thing catch on? When to some extent it's obviously made up. I mean, in this case, you can literally say, look, these are the exact guys who just made it up. And this author says, quote, because it takes on a life of its own. Once the category was made, everything from political groups to civic organizations to every other media group that would emerge would draw on census data. As soon as the census numbers came out, Latino lobby groups could run the numbers and say, look, this is what Latino poverty looks like. This is what Latino educational attainment looks like. They could go up to the Department of Education, for example, and say, Latinos are the second largest minority group, and yet our educational attainment pales to that of whites. Send money to our schools. The exact same thing happened in the market. As soon as the numbers came out, Univision releases the first Hispanic marketing manual in which they take figures like income and they call it, quote, Hispanic buying power. And they take the census report and make pitches to McDonald's and Kellogg's and everybody else, and they start to slowly grow, unquote. Now, stop there for a second. Why should you care? Why should you care if you're not a part of this group? Think about what's really being communicated here. This is extremely important. Identity is not just about what you are inherently. Like biology, yes, that really can't be changed. It's also how power treats you and how you relate to power, because that can be changed. Now, what does it mean when you have someone like AOC, and she's not speaking for herself, because there's not much going on in there. She's speaking for what she's heard her whole life. She's speaking for the academic and political consensus. When she is saying that you as whites do not exist. Think about what you were just told about how Hispanic power increased because they were given this label, which was basically invented out of whole cloth. What that led to, but you are told you don't exist as whites. It's not a real identity. What does that mean for you? Because if you're not part of a racial collective, politically, you don't exist. You're food for others. You exist to be consumed. Your values, your religion, your special little category you've invented for yourself, none of it matters. You're just the stuff that you own that can be stolen, that are given to people with a real identity. That's the reality. You need to think to yourself here, what is the real agenda when they are telling you you don't exist, that you have no culture, that it's illegitimate if you speak in defense of your interests as whites, even though, and let's not kid ourselves here, Marco Rubio certainly wasn't telling us this. He was giving us this kind of soft pitch of, oh, Western culture. Yeah, I get it. But even that was too much for them. Even that was in scare quotes. Because we all know AOC would never deny the creation of a Hispanic racial identity. She would never deny being a proud Latina or Latinx or whatever the hell it's supposed to be, because that's the source of her political power. Even if you look at her life in terms of who's more authentic, who's a more authentic Latino, it's obviously Rubio. Rubio spoke Spanish as a first language. AOC can barely speak it now. I speak better Spanish than AOC does. But that doesn't matter. Why? Because it's a political project. And the whole identity was created as a way to win concessions from oppressive white America. I've often said, and I don't rejoice in this, but I think it's a political reality, the future of America may well depend on whether Hispanics come to see themselves as either the heirs of the conquistadors or the heirs of those they conquered. And we actually know how this played out. This is a battle that kind of already happened in American history. The invention of Hispanics, again, Claremont Institute, 2019, quote, many Mexican Americans had traditionally seen themselves as white. When the 1930 census classified Mexican American as a race, leaders of the community protested vehemently and had the classification changed back to white in the very next census. The most prominent Mexican American organization at the time, the patriotic pro-assimilationist League of United Latin American Citizens, LULAC, complained that declassifying Mexicans as white had been an attempt to, quote, discriminate between the Mexicans themselves and the other members of the white race, when in truth and fact we are not only a part and parcel, but as well the sum and substance of the white race, unquote. Tracing their ancestry in part to the Spanish who conquered South and Central America, they regarded themselves as offshoots of white Europeans. Such views may surprise readers today, but this was the way many Mexican Americans saw the race until mid-century. They had the law on their side. A federal district court ruled in Ricardo Rodriguez, 1896, that Mexican Americans were to be considered white for the purposes of citizenship concerns. And so, as late as 1947, the judge in another federal case, Mendez versus Westminster, ruled that segregating Mexican American students in remedial schools in Orange County was unconstitutional because it represented social disadvantage, not racial discrimination. At that time, Mexican Americans were as white before the law as they were in their own estimation, unquote. But what changed? As victimhood becomes the key to political power, it follows that people do not want to be seen as white. Critical theorists like Herbert Marcuse argue that the revolution has to be based on, quote, the substratum of the outcasts and outsiders, the exploited and persecuted of other races and other colors, unquote. Not American workers. Why? Because American workers are prosperous, because they're actually getting the things that socialism promised but never delivered. They're actually getting the fruits of the revolution that never came. So therefore, they're useless to us. So who do you depend on? The wretched of the earth, the third worlders. If you're an ambitious politician who wants an ethnic political machine, you want people seeing themselves as an outsider group impressed. If you are some activist who just wants to make money, you need a label, preferably one millions of people can register under and rally under. And if you're somebody who wants a socialist revolution, you need somebody to replace the working class that doesn't care about your stupid revolution. So the Claremont article continues, quote, activists saw a pot of gold when Johnson, that's just to say President Lyndon Johnson, decided in the mid-1960s that the government was going to spend lots of money on the Great Society. Benefits such as quotas in government contracts, electoral redistricting, and affirmative action would eventually be dangled as the wages of minoritization. To be able to tell a tale of oppression and discrimination would help to get intended beneficiaries anything from a small business administration loan to a spot in the incoming class at Princeton, unquote. And it is actually that simple. Do you actually have people in adopting an identity because some left-wing radicals and cynical materialists came up with some nonsense so they could get more tax dollars? Does it really come down to that? Yeah. It actually does. That's actually what happened. Yes, race is real. Race is a biological reality. But in terms of its political expression, in terms of like what's the actual identity people adopted, especially when it comes to Hispanic, this is literally what happened. And again, you don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe a word I'm saying. Ignore everything. Believe them. This is their story. This is them saying this is why it was done. And so where are we now? You have this absurd situation where you have Marco Rubio essentially arguing that as someone of Spanish descent, he's a product of the West. And you have AOC, whose ethnic makeup might be a bit more Indian, but probably not too much given her last name, claiming she's among the wretched of the earth. And is essentially promising a foreign audience that she wants to overturn American power because she doesn't believe in Western culture anyway. The reality is that it's all about power. And we have to say that the only reason Rubio is sounding the way he does now is probably because white America is showing at least a little life, a little awareness that we are Europeans in a different hemisphere, that this is fundamentally what America is, that this is a part of the West because we are a child of Europe and because the right is showing some life. And if we're not at the point where you can explicitly acknowledge this, unfortunately, at least you can't attack it on the right. The left, of course, is defined by being simply anti-white. But, oh, it's going better on the right, we're winning. Yeah, not so much. It only goes so far. Speaking of the State Department, Jeremy Carl, author of The Unprotected Class, How Anti-White Racism is Tearing America Apart. Pretty influential book in our spheres. He was recently nominated for a post at the State Department. So he goes before the Senate. And suddenly, the same senators who have built their careers on anti-racism and spoils programs and all sorts of goodies for everybody who's non-white have no idea how white people could feel a little annoyed by this. They have no idea what white people even are. There's no such thing as white people. So here's Senator Cory Booker, who pretends not to understand the Great Replacement.
What do you mean when you say that you believe in the Great Replacement theory?
Senator, thank you for that question. This refers to the intentional demographic replacement of Europeans in Europe. It was invented by Renaud Camus, who was a French scholar.
You think there's an active effort to, quote unquote, replace Americans right now?
Senator, I think the Democratic Party, through its immigration policies, has certainly shown signs of that.
And I don't understand that. So you are saying that if more Americans are Black or Latino Americans, that somehow weakens America because it puts whites in a minority.
Now, of course, the people being brought in are not Americans by definition. They're foreigners. That's what they are. We are talking about immigration. And of course it makes America weaker. Of course it makes America worse off. That's why they're doing it. I mean, look at Newark. Demographic change has consequences. I mean, look at Newark, New Jersey. Booker began his career. Is it better or worse off following the demographic transformation after the Newark riots? No, it's a sty. But it's good for his political career. So to him, it's good. This is what it is to be strong. And if anything, I think Jeremy Carl missed an opportunity to criticize the Great Replacement more directly. What is the policy of the Democratic Party, or really any left-wing policy in the West, other than the Great Replacement? Let's not let the Republicans off the hook. A lot of the Republicans are down for the same thing. I mean, the reason we're in this mess more than anybody is because of Ronald Reagan. But what does the left stand for? How does it define itself? Other than making sure whites are a powerless minority in every country in the world. Wages, the environment, infrastructure, these things don't even enter into consideration. This is all the left is. I'm beyond left and right. No, you just don't want to get in trouble and you want liberal reporters to find you interesting. This is all the left is. This is what it means to be on the left. And you defeat it or you get defeated by it. It's not that complicated. How dare you say there's a deliberate effort to make whites a minority? Well, yeah, this has been going on for a pretty long time and leaders have not been shy about it.
In a little more than 50 years, there will be no majority race in the United States. No other nation in history has gone through demographic change of this magnitude in so short a time.
And it gets worse. Senator Chris Murphy, I know it's tough to watch this because these guys are just so in love with their own voice and they're pontificating and making speeches to themselves and everything else. But here he is saying like, oh, define white identity.
Tell me how you define white identity and what you think is being erased about white identity.
Certain types of Anglo-derived culture that comes from our history.
Like what?
Let me think about this. Senator, I would say if you were to look at the book by one of your former Senate colleagues, Born Fighting, about the sort of Scotch-Irish military culture and certain, pride that went with that, that would be one example. Obviously, you could have sub-elements of that culture. You could have Italians, you could have Irish, and those are in many ways more distinct.
You're worried about white culture. You're not worried about, you're now retreating to ethnic identity. You don't speak about ethnic identity. You speak about white identity. So tell me the values that stitch together white identity and that make it different than black identity.
I would say that the white church is very different than the black church in terms of its tone and style on average. Foodways could often be different.
And those
music could be different.
And those are being erased.
Music could be different. Well, if you look at the Super Bowl halftime show, which was not in English this year.
So our ability to access white churches or white food or white music is being erased?
I am concerned with the majority common American culture that we had for some time that through particularly mass immigration, I think has become much more balkanized, and I think that weakens us. And again, I'm not running away from that comment. I'm not apologizing for it.
Well, I'm way over my time. I think you're struggling to answer this question, right? Because underlying your beliefs is is a sentiment that white culture is just simply better.
And it's the same game as AOC, right? Like, oh, it's fine to define ethnic identity, but not white identity. But then even within the same statement, he takes black identity for granted. But white identity is all scare quotes and has to be carefully defined. And what are the characteristics? What makes it better than other identities? How dare you say such a thing? Well, again, you don't have to ask me. I have my answer. I mean, I have my own answer to that question, which they wouldn't like. But say you don't want to listen to me. Fine. What about the Smithsonian? The Smithsonian published this chart about the aspects and assumptions of whiteness and white culture in the United States. This is Smithsonian. This is a public organization. And among those characteristics were rugged individualism, emphasis on the scientific method, the Protestant work ethic, i.e. hard work being the key to success, planning for the future, and delayed gratification. There's your white culture, according to the institutions you support. Don't ask me. It's right there. You don't have to believe anyone in the sphere. This is what they are saying. And then, of course, you have Tim Kaine.
One of the things you said was American whites are victims of a cultural genocide. Where to start? So you'd agree with me, wouldn't you, that whites are pretty well represented in the United States Senate?
They are well represented in this body, yes, Senator.
And how about in the House of Representatives?
Senator Kaine, I don't have those particular numbers. However,
but you would agree that they're pretty well represented in the House of Representatives.
Senator, I would, again, thank you for the question. I would point out that there were no white Protestants by birth in the 25 cabinet members under Joe Biden.
How about in the ranks of American presidents throughout history, including now, pretty well represented whites?
Senator.
And how about in the ranks of vice presidents during American history now? Whites pretty well represented in that group, right?
Senator, thank you again for the question.
Yeah. I don't think it's hard. How about on the United States Supreme Court? Throughout our history and including now, whites are pretty well represented on the United States Supreme Court, correct?
I think obviously historically, I would of course agree with you. Of course, the vast majority of Americans were white at that time. It's now a much more diverse society.
Let's focus on right now. How about in the ranks of American governors? You think whites are pretty well represented?
I would just have to look at the numbers. I don't know.
Okay, how about this? In the ranks of CEOs of major corporations today, you think whites are pretty well represented?
Senator, thank you for the question. I suspect that they are probably pretty well represented in that. But there are other areas where they're not as well represented.
How about in the ranks of high-income people? And we can define it however you want. Let's just say like top 10% of wealthy Americans. You think whites are pretty well represented?
Senator, thank you for the question. They would certainly be underrepresented with respect to Asian Americans, but they would be overrepresented with respect to other groups.
Yeah. A cultural genocide, that's a stiff claim. And it's an interesting one because it's kind of a white victimhood argument. But if I remember my colleague, Senator Rosen, she was reading comments to you where you had been saying, man, Jews play the victim. Jews like to be the victim. And yet you're making a claim that whites are victimized by a cultural genocide when all the statistics would say, not just in history but today, that whites are very well represented at every level of every institution. They're very well represented in the incomes of Americans. And that doesn't mean each person is high income or each person is a Supreme Court justice. But you could look institution after institution in this country, and the facts completely rebut the notion that whites are victimized by a cultural genocide.
White cultural genocide? What a crazy thing to say. Look at all these white people who are in government. Yeah, here's the thing. Tim Kaine himself would be considered part of that group. But does he represent whites? Does he use his political power to represent white interests? Is the fact that he is white salient in any way to how he exercises his power? Does he even acknowledge that white interests exist? Of course not. His whole life is built on the opposite of this. Does this sinister Muppet represent you? Does he reflect your interests? Is he part of your people in a political sense? No, of course not. There's a word for what he is. It's a very old word. It's a very simple word, and it's a very useful word. The word is traitor. It is not complicated. It is taken for granted that members of a non-white group that join the ranks of government have a responsibility to represent the collective racial interests of their community. That's why they are there. They talk about this explicitly. We need non-white representation because without that, we can't have anything within the political system that represents our community. But nobody talks that way about whites. And if you say, well, historically, most government officials have been white. Yeah, that's because America was defined as a white country. explicitly through our immigration policy. The very idea that non-whites, except for the descendants of slaves, could even be citizens wasn't even decisively settled until like the 1950s. Yes, obviously whites are undergoing cultural genocide. Yes, obviously that's a reflection of demographic change. And it's not just happening here. It's happening throughout the Western world, including in Europe. Our homeland. Suddenly the indigenous rights go right out the window and they don't exist anymore. It's unparalleled in human history. But he supports it because he derives political power from it. Now, Jeremy Carl, this author, is he going to get this position? I mean, the Democrats are in the minority after all, right? Well, no. One Republican has said he will not support him. And again, they all like this. They all have this kind of like half embarrassed, oh shucks, I don't want to get in trouble. Like, look, this is Senator Curtis out of Utah, former mayor of Provo, Utah, very white city if you've ever been there, product of an almost entirely white state, product of an almost entirely white political class. What is he saying? Why would he oppose this? Well, Jeremy Carl isn't pro-Israel enough. Jeremy Carl is of Jewish heritage. He's a convert to Christianity, but ethnically he's Jewish, but, you know, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic. It doesn't even occur to this senator to speak in defense of his own group, which I think by itself decisively disproves what Tim Kaine is talking about. And this is ultimately where we end up. It comes down to a simple question. Can you get the American right to act explicitly in defense of white identity and white interests? Because if you can't do that, ultimately, all this talk about Western civilization and stop mass migration and all the rest of it, it's all meaningless because we're just going to get demographically displaced. And we aren't even allowed to speak in defense of our own interests. We aren't allowed to protest what is being done. We aren't even allowed to say we exist. And of course, the more this power shift takes place, the more groups who are on the border are going to say, we aren't white, we want nothing to do with whites, we're enemies of whites. And of course, that accelerates the whole thing. That accelerates the dispossession. This is what politics is now. It is identity politics. The rest is lies and distractions. And the question is very simple. Can whites take our own side? Can we at least acknowledge we exist, or do we lose everything? And I hate to tell you guys, but sitting on your ass doesn't make you more morally pure. It just guarantees we lose. What is necessary and what is coming is going to be difficult. It's going to be painful. It's going to be frustrating. It's going to be terrible. But that's the message we need. And by the way, that's the message Rupert Lowe, who's a member of parliament, is taking to the people after starting Restore Britain, easily the most exciting development in British nationalism for many years. Now, he was purged from Nigel Farage's Reform Party for explicitly endorsing remigration. I bet Farage regrets this now. Just about everyone in British nationalism is rallying to his side right now.
I'm not going to tell you comforting lies about the condition of our country. I have only ever been honest with the British people, and I will be straight with you now. What is necessary will be incredibly painful. But for the first time in a very long time, voters will have a genuine alternative which is truthful with them about the scale of what now has to be done. The first priority is to control who comes to our country, and more importantly, who stays in our country. Restore Britain will not just stop mass immigration, we will reverse it. Every single illegal migrant will be securely detained and then deported. The message will be unrelenting. If you are in this country without our permission, you will be removed. For the foreseeable future, far more people must leave Britain than arrive. If a foreign national is unable to speak English, lives in social housing, claims benefits, refuses to work, fails to integrate, commits crime, or even actively hates our way of life and wishes to do us harm, then they must leave or be made to leave. Restore Britain will make our communities safe again for women and children. That I promise you. If that means millions go, then millions go.
If millions must go, millions must go. That's the right message that we all need to hear right now. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be all at once, but it's necessary and there is no alternative. Hey guys, quick reminder before we continue. You can follow Identity Politics on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, X, and TikTok. And if you want to make sure you never miss an episode, sign up for our email list. If you believe in this work and you want to help us stay fully independent, You can support us directly on Ko-Fi. We offer bronze, silver, gold, and white membership tiers, or you can give a one-time contribution, whatever works for you. Every bit of support helps fund production, research, and our ability to speak freely without corporate or platform pressure. All the links are in the description below. Now back to the show. Joining me today to discuss this is one of the true heroes of our time. He was once known as Sargon of Akkad, but Carl Benjamin has been one of the most influential content creators for many years, record of achievement few others can match, and is now at the platform Lotus Eaters. I almost feel embarrassed because you know this guy. This is a guy who needs no introduction. Carl Benjamin joins us now. Well, as I said before, my guest today needs no introduction. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And I got to say, Carl, this has got to be the most exciting week in British nationalism for a very long time. I think we've all been waiting for something like Restore Britain for a very, very long time.
Honestly, I never thought it was going to happen. Never thought it was going to happen. Like, I was holding my nose and preparing to vote for Farage, even though I didn't want to. And everyone knows what will happen with Farage if he wins. It will be just Tories 2.0. We'll end up getting backstabbed. We'll end up with more knives in our back. We'll end up possibly even with a Farage wave. We'll end up with some reason that things have to carry on as they always have. And the civil service is being too uncooperative. The institutions are fighting back too much. We can't leave the ECHR because of this, that, and the other. It'll be excuse after excuse after excuse, and everyone knows it. And also, my God, we're going to have to send loads of money to every, Ukraine, Israel, probably a new conflict somewhere. Suddenly we're deeply invested in Venezuela. I don't know. It'll be some other, and everyone knows. And Farage will be weak. He'll be constantly afraid of being hounded and henpecked by the press, as he always is every single day of his life. And anyone who's actually interested in demographic security of the people of the country will be just called a racist, like they have been for the last week. You're a racist. I put out a meme today. I rarely actually make memes because obviously I'm an influencer, so I steal memes.
Right.
But I actually made one today where it's like the Dr. Manhattan on the asteroid, just being like, it's 2026, and I'm being called a racist by the right-wing party. Like, this has been since forever. Since 2000s, it's the right-wing party is calling us racist, And this is back when I was a liberal, I was being called a racist by the right-wing party. Obviously I'm not a liberal now. So, nothing has changed. I'm just like, what is happening? And, you've had Farage's surrogates in the media being like, what is British? How can anyone be British? Like, his ex-lover is on Talk TV saying, are you saying that my half-sister isn't British? And I'm like, well, I don't know who your half-sister is, but you make it sound like she was born overseas. So if that's the case, it's really... And then there were people posting long lists. It's like, what about Prince Philip, the husband of the Queen? Is he foreign? It's like, he was a fucking Greek prince. Yes, he's foreign.
Yeah, right.
It's not. I'm not even saying it's bad. I'm not even saying that he can't be married to the Queen. And honestly, of all the people in public life I enjoyed an intervention from, it was Prince Philip, because they were spicy interventions. But everyone quite liked Prince Philip, to be honest. He was quite popular because he just run his mouth. But but it doesn't change the fact that he's not British. It's not like a derogatory term. It's just a fact.
It is.
And so we're at this point now where the centre-right is currently rounding on Rupert Lowe's supporters, trying to get up their ass about people not being British. And it's like, well, sorry, it's just the fact. Well, how do you know if someone's British? Well, they have British parents. And how many generations back do you need? One. Because they will have had British parents to have arrived at their state of being British. And this is an iterative process that goes back to Cheddar Man, actually. So, and the demography of the British Isles has actually been really stable for literally 10,000 plus years. And the thing is, we assumed this prior to the ability to do genetic testing. But now that we've done genetic testing, we've got the proof of it.
Right.
The last actual demographic impact that was made on the British Isles was done by the Anglo-Saxons. And that was 1,500 years ago. And so now the average British person has somewhere between 30 to 50% Anglo-Saxon DNA, and the rest is pre-Roman Celtic or Brythonic, whatever you want to call it, right? So the indigenous peoples of this island, since the ice caps receded, mixed with Anglo-Saxons, and that's basically it. And we know this, and it's not controversial. It's just the way that it is. And so they're like, yeah, but what about my Bangladeshi friend? It's like, well, do you define him by reference to another continent or another country? Because if that's the case, then I'm sorry, but they're not British. And it's literally nominative at this point. You can't describe them in a way that makes them British without reference to where they've come from. And I'm not even saying they can't live here. I'm not saying they can't marry in. I'm not saying they can't integrate or anything like this. I'm just asking for clear definitions of categories. That's all I'm asking for. Because once you unpack the mysticism, once you dispel the mysticism and come to just concrete definitions that everyone understands, the arguments and the consequences of them just flow from themselves. Who are the native people of the islands? The English, the Welsh, the Scottish, and of course the Irish in Ireland. So who has the primary collective claim to the archipelago that is Britain and Ireland? Well, it's the British and the Irish. It's that simple. And everyone accepts this for Israel, for Palestine, for India, for any countries when it came to decolonization. It was the suitcase or the coffin for all the French. No one was like, well, how do you know that they're French? Like, everyone knew, and with the Indians and whatever, everyone knew with the population transfers of the 20th century, sort of like the destruction of the Ottoman Empire, where the Greeks were just kicked out of Turkey and Turkey kicked out of Greece. Everyone knew. They just understood that it was about their own personal identity and the communities in which they lived, and they understood that actually now was a time of great sorting. When they were kicking the Germans out of Poland and out of Prussia, they knew, Everyone knew. So don't give me this bullshit now. You know, and I know you know, and so that's the end of that story. Right.
And it's amazing how quickly all this rhetoric about indigenous people suddenly goes out the window when it comes to Europeans. Say what you will about us here in America, and I know that the questions are a little different here, but the British people are the indigenous people of Great Britain. Like, there's no mystery about any of this. And the exact same people who will say, like, actually, we're on stolen land here in North America. If you're like, well, did the Europeans get to be native in Europe? Well, that's different. It's actually really complicated. It's not complicated at all.
Yeah, I hate to invoke the Nick Fuentes line, but no, it's not.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's not.
Really simple, actually. I think that's one of his funniest clips, to be honest.
Oh yeah, it's incredible.
But no, he's absolutely right about the fact that it's not very complicated, especially in the case of Europe, where basically there is no non-white indigenous population that they can claim that we displaced, and that's really when you look at like the UN definition of who is indigenous, you'll notice that what it really means is who doesn't have a national state, because it's really predicated on the legal level. So you look at the map, and the map is literally, every country or every continent has like its indigenous peoples. You've got the Amazon tribes in the rainforest. You've got the tribes in Papua New Guinea. You've got the Aborigines in Australia. And then there's just this blank space in Europe, apart from at the north where the Sami are. It's like,
right.
Okay, a couple of things, right? First, Europe is not an uninhabited wasteland. There must be some people who came from here, right? Secondly, the Sami are not indigenous to Europe. They came from Asia, and they came from Asia after the Norwegians had been in Norway for thousands of years. This is all total horseshit. And what you're saying, though, is who are the pre-moderns, right? Who are the people who don't live in a modern state? Who are the people who don't have the sort of modern political arrangements that we have, and therefore live essentially in tribal organizations? That's what you're saying, right? And it's like, okay, well, that's fine, but that doesn't actually mean indigenous. That means primitive, right? That means people who live in a pre-modern way. And I'm not even saying living in a pre-modern way is bad, right? I'm happy for people to live however they want to live. Not my business, not my problem. But don't try and use this kind of technical language to try and slip in that actually the people of my entire continent don't come from here. Like, I realize, and don't get me wrong, I'm an appreciator of the Jacobian theories, but I think that science has actually disproven them. Right? I think I was sad about it as much as anyone else, but we're not from Mars or wherever we're supposed to come from. We're actually from Europe. Is again not a controversial thing in any other context or conversation until it comes to politics, and then suddenly it's off the table.
Right. I mean, one of the things I was talking about earlier in the show, because we had something similar here in America where suddenly nobody could understand what it is to be white. And well, is there such a thing as white culture? And then they shifted it to, well, you can have national cultures. You can't have a white culture, but you can be German, you can be Italian. And I'm thinking to myself, well, hold on, because I've seen so many times where you have these discussions about what it is to be British or what it is to be English, even more specifically. And then suddenly when someone says, well, okay, maybe white's not a real thing, but English is a real thing. And then it's, well, actually, what do you mean by English? Because actually there's Celts and there's Danes and there's Angles and there's Saxons and there's Romans and there's no such thing. It's always this game of deconstruction, which never gets applied to anybody else.
And it's it never really goes anywhere either.
Right.
Because nobody has moved their position on any of this. So there is a valid sort of semantic critique about the use of the terms white and black, because they are universal categories, right? I mean, you know, I've got my keyboard is white, you know, it's a color. So but that's what they're using to get around the fact that actually white and black in the American context are national signifiers, right? So, for example, we don't really have white in Europe because, of course, they are exactly right. It's like, Irish, French, you know, it's like, okay, we are, you know, national cultures. But in America, because you are a mix of basically many European cultures and many European ancestries, and it was always literally since 1619 juxtaposed with African slave immigrants or captives, whatever you want to call them,
and the Indians.
It denotes in America a kind of nationality. So you have a white and black nationality in America. Now, I think there's a fair argument to say that American is the composite of those two things, because I mean, I personally just don't really consider Mexicans or Hispanics to be American. Right, there's something else, frankly. You know, you can argue that the whites and the blacks have been there for 400 years together, whether you like it or not. They're kind of, you know, like everyone can tell an American black, right? Everyone, oh, you're not from Africa. We know exactly where you're from.
Yeah.
You know, it's very, very self-evident. Same with American whites, just to be frank. You know, obviously we can you're American.
Yeah, we have our ways.
Yeah, and I'm, again, not a judgment on any of this, but the Hispanics, frankly, are just not Americans. They're Hispanics. They're from the Spanish Latin empires, and they have got a different culture, different background, different legal system, different language, different religion, different customs, different basically everything. And so it's like, right, okay, I don't really see these as the same group. And so, like, I can understand why in America you have the sort of national signifiers of white and black. But the thing, and one thing I've noticed that when the left were like, oh, we're going to capitalize B black, what that kind of does is take them out of the nationality of American, right? They're trying to say, no, blacks aren't Americans, actually. Which, if I don't want to, if I were a black American, I'd kind of be annoyed by that, because I'd be like, well, you're kind of suggesting I don't have the inheritance that America guarantees, right? By taking us out of that. But then I saw like the white nationalists trying to capitalize white. And it's like, okay, you're doing the same thing, taking yourself out of the identity of American. And what you do when you hollow that out is say, well, this is actually up for grabs. Someone else can take the identity of American if I'm a capital W white. It's like, no, you should actually stand on Americans are white Europeans, right? That's what you are.
That's my stance, right.
And no one ever called Americans when they were like, you know, we're not talking about like the jungle people in Brazil, right? They're not Americans, because that's not the terminology used for those people, right? In the English language, referring to the European, primarily Anglo-Saxon, but then German and Dutch or whoever, settlers in North America, in what became what was the 13 colonies, and what became the United States. That is a sort of almost ethnographic term that we use for the word American. And I have to say, I do think that the blacks are in there as well, I'm sorry to say. But that's a specific named thing and identifiable through space and time that is not just open to anyone, right? That is a thing that exists. And when you say, oh, I'm going to capitalize white, so we're a separate nation, it's like, okay, but you're giving up actually something that's valuable. And I think that you don't deserve to give up, because I think there's a fair argument that there's been an ethnogenesis in America. It's been a long time, and I don't see why 400 years isn't long enough. for
Right.
Americans to consider themselves a distinct ethnic group with distinct customs, cultures, traits, legal system, precedents, language, sort of sub-language, whatever you call it, dialect. Sorry, well, there's an American dialect.
You got to pull rank on us as the mother country, don't you?
And it's not about pulling rank. It's just, I think it's fair to say the Americans are a thing of their own. And if American culture were to disappear tomorrow and just, there was just a God snapped his fingers and all America disappeared and everyone's like, oh, that was weird. Where did they go? We'd recognize what had been lost, right? I mean, there are lots of people who don't like what's been lost. So there are a lot of people like, oh, thank God they're gone. But the point is, it would be noticeable that something tangible and definable had been disappeared from the earth. So if that's the case, then why can't we say that Americans are an ethnic group? I think we can. Right. I think it's fair to.
I agree. But it's certainly true that in America, there's a much more, and this is unfortunate, and it's actually a big problem in some of the movements here, that people have big arguments about what it is to be an American, whether it's synonymous with these things, but these sorts of arguments just simply don't apply to the United Kingdom. Everyone knows what an Englishman is. There's no debate about it. And even when people ask you these sorts of questions, well, is my Bangladeshi friend English? It's like, I don't know. You just called her Bangladeshi. That seems to solve the case. And you get these sort of like word games and deconstruction. But I think what you brought up is a really interesting point, because you see this all the time where they say, they act like saying somebody is not British is somehow a moral judgment. And it's like, but it's not a moral judgment. It just is what it is. I mean, if somebody said like, oh, well, you're not Portuguese, it's like, well, that's not an insult. It's just a statement of reality. And for some reason, I think this comes out of the idea that the United Kingdom and also the United States and really every Western country, to be a part of the community is somehow like a moral grant. Like to be a British person or an American or a German is to be a good person, but it's not. It's a limited definition.
Yeah, this is really interesting, isn't it? Because I did a lot of reading on. I've been doing a lot of reading on the origin of moral systems and laws, and I find these fascinating. Right, so the Middle East has a particular pattern in the way that it derives its moral laws. It's always a single rule giver who is given the rules by God. And you can go back to the code of Ur-Nammu, which is the earliest code of laws that we have, where he says something like, the god Utu empowered me to bring these glorious and holy laws to this benighted and cruel land, right?
Right. And then, that's who tells me what to do. So yeah.
Exactly. The same with Hammurabi says, the god Marduk empowered me to be able to impose Marduk's dictates on the evildoers and the wrongdoers so I could bring peace to the land. The Assyrian kings, the god Asher did this. And then, of course, you've got the biblical perspective, which is, I got 10 tablets from 10 commandments on 2 tablets from God. And it goes all the way down to Muhammad, who had exactly the same experience. There is one experience in the Middle East of law giving, and that is the God has spoken to me, and now I must impose it on you, right? Now, the Mediterranean experience is a bit different because, I mean, especially if you look at the Greeks, you have rational laws. You often, like you can look at any of the Greek city-states and they all have a rational lawgiver. You've got Solon, you've got Draco, you've got Lycurgus. Even Plato went over to Syracuse to be a lawgiver for Syracuse.
Right.
He failed there and he came back being like, no, that place is crazy. But the point is, there was always this idea that the rules would be rationally constructed by man, and then it got divine sanction from the oracle at Delphi. So, for example, Lycurgus imposed his laws on Sparta, and then went to the oracle at Delphi to get them signed off, and said, "Are these good laws?" And the oracle said, "Sparta will never fall whilst it holds to your laws." And so he says, "Right, okay," because he had told them, "Oh, look, hold on, do these until I come back from the oracle, and then we'll see what the oracle says." And the oracle says, well, if you go back, basically, your laws are going to end because you've told them. And so he goes and starves himself to death in the wilderness. And so that's why they're bound to this forever. And it's the same with any of these Greek lawmakers. They propose the laws themselves, and then they get it stamped off by the gods. So you've inverted this particular way of doing things. So it begins, it's rational and human-centered first. Now, the Northwest Europeans had a very different way of looking at morality. The Germanic lawgiver, what's his name? What is the name of the Germanic lawgiver? Like, I've just named a bunch of them from Greece: Solon, Draco, Lycurgus, even Romulus and his 12 tables, right? I've got Moses, I've got Hammurabi, I've got Muhammad, I've got any Assyrian king that you choose to name. But what's the name of the Germanic one? There isn't one. What's the name of the Celtic one? There isn't one. There's just not one. The earliest Germanic code of laws was something, I think it was a Gothic code from like the 6th century AD. So after the fall of the Roman Empire, the Goths wrote down some laws. And so what this means, and you can read like Roman accounts of the Germans and the Celts at the time. What this means is that they viewed morality to be in tribal custom. The morality existed in the relationships between the people. It's actually very similar to a lot of what these sort of Bedouin tribes are like now, where each person has a status and a relation between other people in the tribe. You get this complex web of relations, and that's where the morality is. And you've got to think about those things when you're dealing with. And this is one of the problems that like the Americans had and the British had in like Iraq or Afghanistan, right? Okay, I have to negotiate with which tribal chief to get this thing done, and it's just like, you don't understand what they're like. Right. And it was all that the morality was unspoken and habitual. And this has been preserved in the concept of common law, where it all actually it's revelatory, right? As in you discover what right and wrong are through precedent. And this gets stamped down. It's like, oh, well, that was the case in that case, so that must be the case. But these are always up for revision. For example, you just overturned Roe v. Wade, right? Like these things can be overturned. These things can be changed because the constant process of discovery of what we do on a daily basis to what we consider to be natural, good, and right. And so we've got a completely different perspective on these laws and on morality itself. And so, like I can't even remember where this began now, because this has been a thing that I've been thinking about a lot.
Well, basically the idea that if you're telling somebody they're not British, because they're not British, that it's a moral judgment, even though it's not.
Right. That's where this comes back to, right? Because the unspoken assumption of the Anglosphere countries is that the people are inherently good because they're made good by their own society. You are habituated into the good morals of the clan, of the tribe, of the country. And therefore, if you say someone is not British, you are effectively, in a way, saying that they are not good because they were not habituated into these norms. And this is, I think, why the left are so obsessed with this. I think this is why they're like, no, everyone is British. Everyone is American. Well, why would you say that? Well, because otherwise they're a suspect property, right?
Right.
And this is another reason why they're so insistent on British values. Things like that. It's like, well, we can make them sign up to British values, and therefore you have to accept them, right? It's like, because I don't recognize an external code of law. I don't agree with that, I'm afraid. So I really, it's like a rearguard attempt to make this work, but I don't believe it, and I don't think people generally believe it either.
No, and even the people who make these arguments, as we pointed out, they don't really believe it either. I mean, they usually rebut themselves within their own argument. Here's my foreign friend. How could you say they're not British? And they want to have it both ways, don't they? I mean, nobody actually says, who is it? Was it Ash? I can't pronounce her name, like Ash Sakar or whatever it is, where she has that famous tweet, F off, I'm not British. And then, the very next thing, how dare you say I'm not British? Well, you did. Well,
the thing about Ash Sakar, she tweeted that back in like 2016 when it was very, very vulgar to say that, I have patriotic sentiment and attachments to a particular culture, land, and people, right? And when the height of woke, when everything foreign and strange was winning, she was like, I'm not British. I know where I'm going to get my street cred. But that snapped back in the last couple of years very, very sharply. And now she did a video on a YouTube channel called Double Down News, where she's like, of course I'm English, and I love English. I did English literature at university. It's like, don't care, still reporting you, Ash. Like, you can enjoy the English literature degree in Bangladesh, love. I'm sorry. You're an enemy and everyone can see it, right?
Yeah, by our own words.
By our own, we're winning, lads. But the thing I find most pernicious in America is the idea of a propositional nation, right?
Trust me, we do too.
I know, but it's really philosophically incoherent, and it really bothers me, actually, because it suggests that before Abraham Lincoln, who suggested the idea that the nation was founded on a proposition, there were no Americans, and what were you fighting over in a civil war then? How do you define it as a civil war if there isn't a nation to be fighting over in the Declaration of Independence. Who is we and we the people? It's just this assumed group of people who are not a nation somehow. How do they come together? How do they have a we? And what happens if you disagree with the proposition? Are you no longer an American? Do you lose your citizenship? Do you get kicked out? Because all of the communists aren't Americans, and you got communists running around the streets. You've got loads of Mexican nationalists running around in Los Angeles or in California. You've got loads of Muslims who have taken over parts, weirdly, than like Midwest and whatnot. Sorry, are these not Americans as well then? Because they obviously can't agree with the proposition because it conflicts with the dictates of Muhammad. So what now? The idea of a proposition nation has just fallen apart, and it was a farce on the face of it anyway. Because to whom are you proposing? It's not monkeys in the woods that are just like, hey, dear apes, shall we form a nation on this principle? And a couple of others are like, good idea, why not? It's nonsense. It's obvious nonsense. There has to have been an agreed settlement before any of that can happen. And really, when you look at it as well, the American founding principles are just pretty stock and trade English principles up until that point. They're really, really easily identifiable as traditional English values. So, especially at the time and at the place. So it's just why are we pretending? Why are we spending any amount of time pretending that this is something magical that's descended from the heavens when it's very explicable through just a basic sociological analysis?
Yeah, the sophistry surrounding all this is extremely tiresome. Even right now, going on X, you're still seeing people trying to do supposed conservatives, trying to do this rearguard defense of the propositional nation. It's like, but you don't believe what you're saying, because if this is actually true, why don't we get to just denaturalize about 50 million people who explicitly don't believe in these things? Why don't we just get to denaturalize the people who can't even be bothered to say this, the American flag, is actually my flag? I mean, by rights, we should be able to kick them out then.
Of course. And if it's actually true, why is it geographically bounded?
Everyone could be American.
Why isn't it that just, half of China suddenly like, oh yeah, I don't like the CCP. I prefer Western liberal values. Well, you're all Americans now.
Isn't that what Boris Johnson tried to do with Hong Kong and Britain, though?
Probably. But the point is, that it would imply that Americans are just springing up anywhere in the world. You'd have random patches of Americans breaking out in any nation and continent, which it's not true, and everyone knows it's not true. So why are we playing into the fiction? Come on.
Well, there is something. I mean, luckily, I don't think you have to deal with it so much, but there are a lot of Americans who actually do kind of believe in that. It's sort of like, what is that? I think it's Apocalypse Now, where it's or maybe it was Full Metal Jacket. Inside every gook, there's an American trying to get out. This idea that the American identity actually is universal. And by fighting, we literally will fight wars with other peoples and blow up their country. And it's like, well, why are we doing this? To make them American, to bring them the American way of life.
This was literally the rationale between Iraq and Afghanistan.
Right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And of course, it doesn't really work, but people still want to believe in it. And I think more broadly, Northern Europeans, Northwestern Europeans are all sort of given to this, where for an idea to be valid, and maybe even for an identity to be valid, it must be universal. And this sort of cripples us because, on the one hand, we all know that a lot of these people, especially people from the third world who are in these countries, still fundamentally regard themselves as members of their home countries. And this isn't just me making it up. There was an interesting poll in the United Kingdom a while back where they asked white English people, are non-whites in England English? And most whites said yes. And then they asked the non-whites in England, do you consider yourself English? And they said no. So you had this kind of absurd situation where the white English people are saying, you guys are English, and the non-whites are saying, no, we're not. But you see where that comes from. I mean, there's this lack of confidence in having a unique identity that all Europeans seem to have. And it's crippling us because it's so obvious that everybody's just being taken advantage of and that none of these arguments are being made in good faith.
So, you know what, right? In a way, they kind of are being made in good faith. It's just that the people who are making them are living in a kind of liberal mysticism. And I think it's because I used to live in that mysticism that I understand it better than most, because I had to go through the difficult process of really coming out of it. And it's painful, right? It's genuinely painful.
Yeah, it is.
To abandon this truly held set of beliefs. And you have to work really hard to sort of like, okay, what am I, right? And it was in about 2018, 2019, I was like, right, what am I? well, I think I'm an Englishman. Am I not an Englishman? What does that mean? And so I had to go through this process of being like, okay, what does it mean? What does this mean? Because you're not taught this in school. And where 100 years ago, the culture would have just informed all of this about you, and it would have been completely normal. Like in the 18th century, in the 19th century, there were entire legal discussions and books about the rights of Englishmen and things like this. So it was completely normal. And yet by the mid 20th century, we're just like, I don't know what I am. I'm a nobody. I'm just a universal liberal man who just exists outside of time, space, place, and people. And we're all just free agents wandering around the universe on our own, aren't we? And it's like, no, actually, no one's like that. And this is the problem that Europeans have, is that essentially it's the boomers who are the most liberal generation ever and genuinely view themselves as like the honestly, is the end of history. The children at the end of history, frolicking after all of the struggles of the world have been completed. Obviously, this didn't age well, and a lot of them genuinely have a hard time accepting that the very notion of being the individual, as we interpolate it in Western countries, is a tribal signifier. Right. This is an ethnically particular way of looking at the world. It's been inherited through a long process of intellectual and ideological development, and it is just not shared by foreign peoples. And they just don't understand us when we try and explain what living in a free society as an individual means in a way that we habitually understand, they can't conceive of. So, for example, theft is a really great example, right? So if you were to go to, say, I don't know, a town in Norway or something that's just full of Norwegian people, and you left your laptop on the table, on a table in a coffee shop or something, you're getting that laptop back, right? You'll go back into the coffee shop and you'll be like, I left an hour ago, I left a laptop in. Like, oh, is it this one? In their accents. And, but if you do the same thing in any other country around the world, you won't get that, right? And you won't get that because they have different, honestly, a different metaphysic when it comes to society. They view society as a competing, vaguely hostile arrangement in which clannish groups of people have defined territories, rights, and duties and entitlements. And I mean, you see this in places like Lebanon, right? Where there's no such thing as diversity because each group has their own marked out territory. Like, you don't go down there because you're not part of that group. Right. The idea to an Englishman or an American to have, well, I mean, maybe not the same in America, but like the idea in England that there would be a place in England I couldn't just go is alien. I mean, why would I think that I wouldn't be able to? And yet that's the experience for most of the world. And not for here. So we just, like I said, we don't understand that our view of individualism is actually ethnically particular. And don't get me wrong, it's appealing. We think it's nice. I like the idea. It works for us. And so it's an easy thing to sell to people, but actually on a real human level, it doesn't work in these societies. And like in Iraq and Afghanistan, we had no idea why they weren't interested in it. We had no idea. And they didn't understand what we meant by it. And there was no way. I can't remember who was it that said civilization is incommunicable. Because that's really, that is a great example.
Is that academic agent who said that? I think it was.
It's not his quote, though.
Who came up with it first. I just know
it comes from like Thomas Carlyle or something like that.
I see.
But that was a really abject example of how they just can't understand what we're talking about. And so when we turn up, we're like, well, we're going to create a liberal democracy. We will have a rule of law and everyone has equal representation and they're free to do what they want. They're like, oh, great, this is a treasury we can loot, right?
Right. That's exactly right.
African dictators, right. So I get to use the force of an army to extort money out of my ethnic rivals. Oh, okay, well, I will then. And it's like, oh, okay, no, that's not what it's supposed to be, actually. But how do you explain that to them? How do you explain they've got to give up thousands of years of habitual, normal social life? And as well, there's an arrogance to this, where it's like, well, hang on a second, they have settlements, right? They've figured out how to live with one another. Like, they're not in constant states of war. No. Some places they are, but like for most of it, they do understand one another in a relational term. It's like, well, you don't go over there, they don't come over here. And with that tribe, we have this agreement. With that tribe, we have that agreement. We'll send them, 5 tons of cotton or whatever it is we do, blah, 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 blah. And, whatever the arrangements are, they have their arrangements, and our arrangements are different to theirs. And we just thought, oh, no, we can impose it. It's the same for everyone now. It's like, no, everyone's different. And it's not bad that they're different.
I mean, this is one of the problems with Anglo-American societies is that, because you're seeing it everywhere. You're seeing it not just in England, you're seeing it not just in the United States, in places like Minnesota, but you're also seeing it in New Zealand and Australia, and especially in Canada, where the genius of the British Empire was it created these institutions and good government, as they would say, that allow people to build these successful societies. And they did it better than anybody. We did it better than anybody. But the problem is when you have a clannish society within that, it's almost like a hack because there's nothing you can do from within the system to stop it. There's no way to prevent an in-group with strong clannish preference from taking advantage of the entire thing because everybody outside it almost can't recognize what's actually happening. And so you're seeing this everywhere within the span of like a decade. You're seeing essentially ethnic cartels taking over politics in all these Anglo countries.
Totally true. And the way that the British Empire managed it was just not giving them access to the levers of power, right?
Right.
The British Empire was really, really good at managing the differences between the tribal groups that it ruled over. The entire British Empire was manned by something like 125,000 soldiers.
Yeah, it's not a lot of guys.
And something like 150,000 bureaucrats for a quarter of the globe, for 500 million people all around the world. And it's like, right, okay, how does that happen? And that happens through tact. That happens through having arrangements with some groups. So for example, Uganda was a protectorate. And so what we did is we guaranteed certain rights and privileges for the dominant ethnic group in Uganda. I can't remember the name of them, obviously. And their king. And so he would make sure that the minority ethnic groups would essentially stay in line, they wouldn't cause trouble. And he would get a certain benefit out of the trade that we would do. We would buy whatever cash crop they were producing. We would guarantee the trade routes and they would make money. We would make money. They would retain their kind of status as the dominant group in Uganda. And there was a settlement that everyone understood. And so it was not worth anyone's time to upset the apple cart. We didn't have to be invasive in their culture and do anything about it. We were just like, no, this is the arrangement and it benefits everyone. And it was much the same in India. We didn't go down there and say, right, you're all going to convert to Christianity.
Right. Yeah. Right.
In the caste system. We were like, you live in the way that you live. You just work according to the rules that we set. And we set the rules and we determine when they've been broken, when they haven't. And 400 years that lasted for. And at the moment in New Zealand, right, there is a battle going on between the Maori and the woke, like white liberals now,
right?
Because the Maori are appealing to a settlement made with the British Empire, where the British Empire said, "Oh no, you will get your particular area of New Zealand. Here's a series of privileges that we will grant you, and in exchange, you don't cause us any trouble, and you just do whatever work is needed." Blah blah blah. And the woke libs are like, "Oh no, we need one rule for everyone."
Yeah, right.
We're not having that. We have our settlement. We have our dispensation. We liked those old imperialists who were actually considerate to our situation. And this is actually a more human way of doing things. If you
right. Yeah,
it's robotic to say one rule for everyone, regardless of differences.
Yeah, there is a kind of, I hate to say the left are the real racists, but in a way it's kind of true in the sense that there's a condescending approach when you say, well, listen, you don't really understand your own culture. You don't really understand the way of doing things. Let us show you this better way of doing things. Whereas in the evil old days of racism, you could argue that people actually treated these cultures with more respect because they respected their autonomy of their community. I mean, they understood that we weren't all the same.
One of the things that people get annoyed about Tommy Robinson for is the fact that he likes the Gurkhas and the Sikhs, right? And everyone's like, yeah, but they're not, they're Indian too. And it's like, yeah, but Tommy is thinking in the old imperial model when he thinks of the Gurkhas and the Sikhs, because these were groups that were insanely loyal to the British Empire, because we respected them as we had, quote, warrior races that we thought
right. Official designation, yeah.
An official designation. And obviously, we thought of ourselves as a warrior race, which obviously we were.
Right.
And so we what we would do is essentially just use them as professional soldiers, obviously, but they would have a particular station in life that had honor and dignity and pay, and it was respectful to what they were. Because with the Gurkhas in particular, we'd defeated them in a couple of wars, but then the British officers in charge came out and go, they were bloody fierce. It's like, well, we could incorporate that, couldn't we? And we use them to this day. I mean, huge percentage of the whole economy is based on British remittances.
Right.
And everyone likes them. It's the same with the Sikhs. The Sikhs, I think, are actually like Matt Goodwin was pictured with the Sikhs in Gorton and Denton. But the thing is, that's not wrong, actually. The Sikhs were an imperial vassal of Britain and still view Britain as the empire, and the problem is we don't view ourselves that way, because if we were to view ourselves that way, there would be a kind of natural hierarchy that was in play that would make things fit properly, and it would make it more respectful for both sides. But as it is, we're trying to play equals and it's a really difficult thing for Westerners, in particular the Anglos, frankly, to understand, is that the Anglo doesn't really have any equals on the world stage, right? Like whenever you open a list of the largest empires in history, it's the British Empire by far. Whenever you open a book of science, who got the most scientific discoveries, it's the British by far. It's like in all these sorts of Britain has had so many cultural achievements, and its scientific achievements, engineering achievements, military achievements. Like imagine you come from Bangladesh or something, and you're like, right, I have to go for a history lesson. Well, what's the history of my culture compared to the history of your culture? And you're going to find yourself not being able to measure up, because it's just the way that these things go. Right. And, and I'm not saying this to try and sound like a supremacist or anything like that. I'm not saying these people are bad or inferior or anything like that. But there's always this kind of collective national pride that people have. And again, people carry it with them. And I think this is the reason that we have so many foreign rapists, because I think a lot of them are actually standing in awe of Western European cultures, and therefore getting access to our women and children is an insane thrill to them.
Right. It's a kind of, yeah. Joe Sobran says, I know exactly what you're talking about. Joe Sobran has this great quote where he says, Western man presents this image of superiority to the rest of the world, even if he's unaware of it, even if he's not trying to. Because, people will say things like, oh, the British Museum has all these things from all these other cultures. It's like they all would have been destroyed if the British didn't get these things. Like we revealed the world to itself.
Yes.
The British Empire was the thing that ended slavery. The British Empire was the thing that did all these incredible things that basically saved these cultures and found out about these cultures. But you don't get gratitude for that. You get contempt. But you get contempt when you are saying, okay, well, actually, we're going to put ourselves on your level now because we're actually all equal. It would actually be better. You actually get more loyalty and respect if you say, right, we are the ones who are the standard bearers of civilization, and then everybody understands their place in the global hierarchy. When you say, well, we're all just equal, what you actually get is basically hatred.
Well, what you're doing is lying.
Yeah. And they know you're lying. And they know you're lying.
And nobody respects a liar. Nobody.
Right. And everybody can understand when they're being condescended to.
Exactly. And so when you've got a bunch of white middle-aged HR ladies saying to someone who grew up in, rural India or something, oh, no, we're all equal in this corporation, blah, blah, blah. You are just being condescending. You don't understand. Yeah. And I hate to use the term privilege, but there is something to the idea that you carry a kind of inherited privilege. It's not necessarily racial in the sense that it's civilizational. And so a person from the civilization, just the person from outside of the civilization can't ever view themselves on your terms as your equal. Right. But I mean, this goes both ways. If this white HR lady was stranded in the jungles of Papua New Guinea, she's not the superior of the
yeah, these things they're not universal. I mean, that's kind of the whole point.
It's contextual, in the office, sure, but if she's got to decide what frog to eat or what frog to eat, poison her arrows or something, she's screwed. So it's all contextual, and it's none of it's absolute. But there is a kind of awe in which the rest of the world looks at the West and the white man, and there's a lot of resentment out there, and we see it all the time on Twitter. We see it all the time on Twitter.
Yeah. It's very overt, very explicit.
Yeah, I mean, like Francis Fukuyama, for all of his flaws, has a really salient analysis of this kind of thought process in The End of History and The Last Man, in which he describes it as the sort of Thimotic Soul, the Plato's tripartite soul. You've got the logos, you've got the vegetative, I can't remember what it's called, epidemikos or something, and then the thymos.
Yeah,
and
whatever it is.
Yeah, and the thymos is the collective spirited part of the soul. It's the part of you that feels pride and will stand up for yourself, and it's naturally connected to the group. Whereas the logos is quite, and the epidemikos, whatever, the vegetative part, these are both individual aspects of the soul. You've only got your own mind, you've only got your own desires. But when it comes to your pride, that's connected to the things around you. And you see it like Indians are all the time on Twitter. Indian number one sort of Twitter. I don't know how to describe the Indian nationalist Twitter, where it's just like they say things that are preposterous, but they want to believe it because it's how they feel like they are your equal. And this is a particular issue in the black community as well, right? This is why they fall for all of the
AI slop, the fake history and everything else.
King Henry VIII was black. All the Japanese samurai were black. Everything was black. I'm sorry.
You feel like it's not a good feeling, but you feel pity, and it makes you feel kind of dirty. But it's like, come on, guys.
I can understand.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know where it's coming from, but it's like they're clinging to everything.
Yeah, and this is why I kind of hate it when the right actually does denigrate those tribal cultures that actually do carry some nobility with them, right?
Right.
So, like, a good example is the Zulus. The British love the Zulus, right? And it comes from the Anglo-Zulu Wars. It comes from Iswandana and Rorke's Drift, right? Where they gave us a good run for our money, but we won, obviously, because we won everything. But the point is, the Zulus were not a degenerate culture, right? They were just, an African tribal culture, but they weren't degenerate. They were brave warriors. They had customs, they had traditions, they had a way of doing things, and they have that way of doing things even to this day. And this puts them on the side of the white South Africans against the black government, because they understand, no, there is a way of doing things. We had all of this settled, very much like the Maori in New Zealand who were for the empire and not for the liberals. Like, there is a kind of nobility in this, and they carry what Evola called the race of the spirit, right? They uphold, they carry the face of the thing that their ancestors built. And I respect that, even if it's not mine, and even if I'm like, okay, they're using spears or whatever, okay, whatever, I don't care. They think of themselves as carrying something noble. And actually that, I think, is really respectable. I think that's what the British see in the Zulu War with the Zulus. It's like, well, hang on a second. These guys fought for it. It's the same with the Gurkhas. These guys fought for it. These were not just sly, slimy. They put their chests out and they went for it. Okay, we won, obviously, but like, that is not ignoble at all. No. And I that's a respectable thing, even if they're not like us, and even if we think of ourselves as better than them or whatever. I think there is a lot of room for respect for people who behave in a proper way according to their own culture and customs. A lot of people frankly don't, and are kind of slimy and sleazy, and are coming over here just to get remittances, Somalia. You know what I mean? Like, everyone knows the Somalis are just here to take as much benefits as they can. Everyone knows. Like, 45% of the Somali economy is remittances. That's Western benefits. Sorry, that's that's not the Zulus doing that.
No, and it's especially obnoxious when they frame it as like conquest or something. It's like, no. You can respect an enemy, and you can even respect somebody who conquered you in a way. It's like, all right, well, this happened. But somebody who comes over and is living basically off your pity and then lectures you like, actually, this shows we've defeated you. It's like, No, it shows that we just are morally weak. But if we just stop doing this, you're going to go away, and that's all there is to it. Which I guess brings us to what's happening now with this party. It seems like Farage's strategy here to counter all this, other than the smears and the things you talked about. I mean, is it too much to say that the Tories and Reform are just going to merge? I mean, that almost seems like that's what's happening. Well, I mean, they're already talking about an electoral pact, aren't they?
How many Tories have to be in Reform before it becomes a Tory party?
Right.
Because at the moment, it's something like 85% of the Reform Party are ex-Tories. So how many does it take? Is it 86%? 87%? I mean, we're getting pretty close, right? It's one of those things where, it's the Sorites paradox, where it's like, how many grains of sand make a heap? Is it 10? Right. Is it 9? Is it 7? Well, I don't know, but we it's a real, it's definitely a thing, though, right? Nigel Farage is no different to the Conservatives, really, and he's always been a kind of exiled Conservative anyway. I think really what he's always wanted is for the Conservative Party to come and bend the knee to him and say, no, you were right on Brexit. We shouldn't have kicked you out. You were right on that, and we take you back. And frankly, it's actually their fucking mistake that they didn't do this. In 2019, when Farage stood down the Brexit Party to let Boris get the win, Boris should have made him a Lord. He should have made him a Conservative Lord. He should have said, Nigel, you were right. You were absolutely right on all of this. And it not because, I mean, it would have been the right thing to do from their perspective. But even if you look at it tactically, it's like, okay, well, this takes out a threat to our right flank. If we take away Nigel Farage and put him as a Conservative Lord in the House of Lords, we're safe from him forever. We never have to worry about Nigel Farage coming back and currently doing what he's doing, which is crushing us in the polls. So it's like, it was your own stupid mistake and I guess ego or whatever, but it would have been such an easy thing to do. It would have cost you basically nothing. And now Farage is on his warpath, which is essentially against the Conservative Party. He wants to be the real Conservative in the room, which is why he's calling you a racist right now. So,
yeah. Well, it seems like it's working. I mean, you can almost expect where you're going to get this reversal with the Tories just go away, essentially get eaten by Reform. And then what a lot of people, I think, were hoping Reform will be Restore. And Restore will be the actual right-wing party. And it's been surprising to me how, especially, I mean, let's face it, far-right movements in the Anglosphere, and America and Britain are both in the Anglosphere. We tend to have a lot more infighting, I think, than I think a lot of other people, maybe something to that individualism. But I got to say, it seems like the whole British nationalist sphere is extremely united when it comes to this one question of Restore Britain.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? I actually don't think the right in Britain or in America or anywhere else is more divided than any other kind of movement, actually. I spent many years studying the left to try and understand what it is they're actually asking for. And one thing you notice is they are all wildly divided. They love splintering themselves off into little mini versions of each other that have a very minor doctrinal difference with the rest, in order to say, no, I'm the real left wing. I'm this. I'm the anarcho-syndicalist, whatever, all this. the right is actually, honestly, I don't think the right is as bad for that as they are. So I actually, and I'm not saying it's good, the amount of infighting on the right, but I don't think it's as bad as people think. But one thing that the thing that it really all drills down to is the fundamental axioms upon which the world hinges. And the fundamental axioms of this center of British politics are: nobody has a fundamental right to Britain. So the state is the only legislator in the world that can give a moral right or refusal to claim to ownership of Britain. Now, on the left, of course, they would argue that nobody has that right. Nobody is illegal, and everyone in the world has a claim to Britain. And on the right, we say, well, no, the British people, who have been the custodians of the land since time immemorial, are actually the people collectively with the claim to the country. And really, that's the true principle. That's the true axiom. It is not true that that the morality of the claim to the country is just done through executive fiat, through the state, through legislation, through the issuing of passport. And it is not true that literally everyone on earth has a claim to anywhere they want. And we see this revealed in the fact that they care about Israel or Palestine. The center right, the center care about the Israelis have a claim, the Jews have a claim to Israel, and the left say no, the Palestinians have that claim instead. So right, so you both concede that there is a group who has the monopolistic claim to this particular area of land, and you just have different groups that you agree to.
Right.
When it comes to our country, we think we have that monopolistic claim, and you've already agreed that someone can have monopolistic claims, and there's just simply no one else who could make that kind of claim in Britain, because as we said at the beginning, we are the autochthonous people of this place.
Right.
We are indigenous. Like there is no one else before us.
Right. Yeah. And as you say, the principle has already been conceded by everybody. I mean, everybody's a blood and soil nationalist for somebody. And you generally don't have to scratch too hard to figure out who that is. I mean, a lot of times they just come out and tell you.
They're very public about it. They've got an Israeli flag or a Palestinian flag, and you know who they're a nationalist for.
Right.
Ukrainian flag or whatever it is.
Right.
In every other case, they're completely crystal clear about it. It's only when they want to take something away from you do they make the argument.
Well, the group doesn't actually exist, and actually it's very complicated.
What are you defending? What is an Englishman? What is Britain? Not having those arguments. We know what we are.
We're just on a floating rock in space. Nothing matters. You get that one too.
Say the N-word then.
Yeah, right.
We're just atoms and void, but I'd never say that word. It's like, really? Right. Exactly. But the going back to Restore though, it's been genuinely wild to watch, and it really has been sort of like a moment that has been pregnant with potential leading up to this, because I didn't know this was going to happen. No one knew this was going to happen.
No, it really came out of nowhere.
Exactly. And the thing is, I'd had conversations with Rupert and his assistants saying, look, guys, I think you should start a political party. And they're like, wow, it's difficult. We're just going to be a movement for now. I was like, okay. And they were like, well, but you have made the most persuasive case. I'm like, oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. And so when this dropped, we were all just like, oh, fucking finally.
Yes.
Finally. Because the thing that distinguishes Restore from any other political party in Britain is that it puts its locus of concern in the British people itself, right?
Right.
And this is, and Rupert expressed it perfectly in the video. This is Britain, and we will do things our way. The country is ours. We are the British people. We have the primary collective claim to the islands, and we have the primary collective claim to how things ought to be done. Our rules, not someone else's. This is where he's like, we're going to ban halal and kosher. We're going to reverse mass immigration. We don't care about minority issues. We're doing what the majority actually wants done because this is ours. And that was the flare that went up, and the same with like the left. Whenever they get like a Jeremy Corbyn or a Bernie Sanders or something like that, they've got all their minor disagreements, but the fundamental is I am a communist, right? And so they're like, oh, that's the communist, great, that's our guy. And that Rupert Lowe was very much the same. It was the premise was Britain belongs to the British, and it's our choice on what we do. And everyone on the right was like, okay, brilliant. Finally, thank God. Something Farage could never say, would never say, unless it was about Israel or Ukraine or whatever, But finally, we have someone in our corner for us. And so it has been chaos, absolute chaos for the past 4 days in Britain, and it has been amazing.
Oh,
absolutely amazing.
It's really fun to watch.
What? Yeah, I bet it is. I bet it's great.
First time in a long time I've been looking at you guys with a certain amount of envy when it comes to political.
Imagine what we were like with Trump in 2016 though, right? Like,
yeah, that's true. Right.
Man, Brexit was great, but it wasn't like, this, it was the precursor to all of this. Like, and Brexit was predicated on the same principle. It's just no one in public life was willing to articulate it, because it would have gone a lot further if they had. But of course, Farage being Farage, he didn't. But we have the same envy when Trump was going on. I was just like, oh wow, look, the Americans are doing something really exciting here. Whether you like Trump or not and how it's panned out, it's not perfect or anything, but it was still the nativist impulse gaining control of politics and shaking it by the neck, and so like I watched the whole thing from outside, so I know the feeling where it's like, oh, our guys over there are doing something great. Love to see it. But it has been chaos, right? The center right, the reform types getting slaughtered everywhere. In the comment sections, metaphorically, their arguments are just falling apart. And Lowe has been not just holding his ground. He's been taking ground, advancing, right? They're like, oh, Rupert's been saying racist things, and he literally just posted his own page. I don't care. I don't care. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to be even more racist. It's brilliant. And the fact that he's got this amazing demeanor, right? So you'll notice that Reform have this general kind of clown car.
Yeah, exactly. It's so flippant. It's so forced. It reminds you of like one of those TV commercials where the guys are watching football games and acting silly, and you're just sort of like, what is this? There's no dignity to any of this.
In Britain, right? If you grew up in Britain in the 80s and 90s, and you were from a middle-class family, you probably went on a Butlins holiday where you would go to a sort of a park, sort of big area, and they'd have lots of rides and stuff like this. And then in the evenings, they'd have cabaret appearances, like amateur cabarets, where people would come out in sparkly suits, and they'd have lots of lights and stuff. But it would all be a bit naff. It would all be a bit rubbish. But it was to entertain the kids while the parents sat at the back and drank, right?
Yeah,
for their
right.
holiday, because it's middle class parents earning like 30K a year, 40K a year, something like that. That's what they can afford. You can't afford to go on a holiday elsewhere, So, and that gives you the evening where the kids are all entertained by the entertainers, and you can just drink and relax and have a good time, and it's no problem at all. Right? That's what Reform looks like to me.
Yeah.
And I went on a bunch of these when I was a kid, so I've got first-hand experience of why this looks like this. They've got this kind of irreverence to them, which isn't charming. Right? It's actually kind of annoying because the situation is so dire, and the pall across the country is so dark, and the looming issues that we have to address are very, very difficult. And I think the reason that Rupert Lowe's message resonated so widely and deeply with people is because he took on the aspect of I guess sort of an English aristocrat who viewed himself
from the farm and everything else. Yeah, he's got the jacket that you just sort of associate with it and everything else. And he didn't give you happy talk. In fact, he basically said, "I'm not going to tell you comforting lies, and what is ahead is going to be painful." I mean, that's, I think, a message that a lot of people wanted to hear. And then, if millions must go, millions must go. Them's the breaks.
Yep. And notice about his thing. He was speaking to his audience like they were adults. Right. He wasn't. Farage blusters a lot. Farage bullshits a lot. And he's got a charming Jack the Lad persona, which is fine when you're at the pub, when things are, we're arguing about membership of the European Union. So, I think we shouldn't be in it. I think he should be in it. Okay. We're arguing now about whether the English get to live in England. That's the subject. Do the English live in England? And it's like, right, okay, that's a bit weightier, actually. That's something that we haven't had to contest with since the Viking invasions. Right. But we've had this conversation, and it was a long time ago, but it was very, very painful. It was a very difficult thing to go through. And we're having that conversation again now. We have a new Danelaw in this country in many areas. And our elites are, at least back then, our elites were fighting the invaders. Like, our elites.
The invasion is actually good for you.
Exactly. And so Rupert Lowe approaching us maturely as a responsible steward of the land, speaking to us honestly, plainly, and directly, respecting our intelligence and saying, look, we just have to work together to fix these problems, or else essentially the implication we lose it all. I can totally see why that resonated so deeply with everyone and so widely. It's like, yeah, no, that is true. And finally, someone with the proper demeanor and gravitas has come along to say, look, guys, we have to do something now. This has to be the time. And so it's, like I said, it's been carnage on the British right for the past couple of days, because the reform people are just, they're caught well out on the edge. They're just completely caught out.
What are they even for now? I mean, what's the point of them?
Exactly. And a poll came out yesterday. No, the poll came out today, but it was done on, so Rupert announced on the 13th, and this poll was done on the 15th and 16th. And the Reform Party were down by 3 points. And like the other, so they're hiding Restore in, it's only going to be like 2 or 3 points in the polls at the moment, because it's literally brand new party day one. But this was a normal poll that was just organically done. But Nigel being down to 24%, Labour on 19%, the Conservatives on 18%, the Greens on 17%. It's like, nice, that's serious, mate. Right? You were supposed to be, if you were the insurrectionist you made yourself out to be, you'd be at 40%. Like you peaked at around 35, 36%, and now you're at 24%, and you've still got 3 years to go. Like, you've now got a massive threat to your right. And that was like, essentially, you were the default alternative for the right wing. So what do? You're going to be squeezed now between Labour and Restore. Like, he's going to have to fight really, really hard. And the thing is, I don't even see a particular way forward for him, actually.
No, I don't either.
Who does he persuade? I'm going to out-bureaucratize Labour and the Tories. No, you don't have the experience that they do, and nobody actually wants what they were selling, which is why you were able to beat them in the first place. And then it's like, right, you're going to outright wing Rupert Lowe? I don't think you are. I don't think, you've made too many enemies on the right, mate. You've got no support, whereas everyone is supporting Rupert Lowe. So where do you go from here? And so I'm expecting to see in the next sort of like 6 months a slow but sure shaving off of Farage's lead till he reaches parity with the other parties. And I imagine Restore will probably get up to about 5 or 10% and start organically polling in the next 6 months, I would guess. Now, we're in a time of massive change, so it could be anything, right? Anything could happen. The one thing,
3 years till the next general election?
3 years to the next general, at most.
Right. It could be whatever, right? Yeah.
But the Labour Party are actually not keen on choosing new leaders and forcing general elections.
No.
Because the Labour Party very rarely wins them. Keir Starmer is only the 4th Labour Prime Minister in all of history. Fourth win, the Prime Minister who won an election, the general election in all of history. So they tend to not like doing it. The Conservatives are usually the ones who win general elections. So Labour try to avoid that whenever they can and just get as much evil done while they're in power. So it's probable that it'll be 3 years. It is probable. Although it would have been nice if it wasn't. But now, actually, I'm kind of hoping. No, I want the 3 years.
Yeah. You want some time to build this up. I mean,
exactly.
And you kind of do you expect that some of these you're going to see the same sort of thing that the Tories were doing with reform, where they start defecting? That some of these reform guys are going to start defecting to Restore.
It's already happened. So today, something like 7 or 8 councillors from Reform have already defected to Restore. It's already happened. And the thing is, so one thing in Reform, Farage and Zia Youssef run Reform in the same sort of way that sort of Saruman runs the Tower Isengard, right?
Right.
Like, all of the orcs at the bottom are just his underlings who he'll just send to their dooms, right? He doesn't care about them. And he might have a couple of assistants like Wormtongue around him, but otherwise it's him and the mass. That's how Farage acts with his party. Whereas like the membership who make up the local associations hate being dictated. I heard it described today at the office. Like, one of the guys was like, God, Farage and Reform just sound like they're run by dicks. They're just constantly shitting on their own local association.
Oh, yeah.
Constantly overriding their decisions. Because what was normal prior to now is that local associations would choose their own candidates to run in the election, right? So it'd be someone local from the area who's a member of the party, who they thought was the best among them, who would have some purchase in the local community, and that kept British politics grounded, right? It meant that the people of the local area had some personal representation, had some investment and stake in what was happening, and Reform are just not doing that.
It's such a one-man show. It's incredible.
Absolutely, and you see it all the time. It's constantly on display. And so it's not surprising that these, and the thing is as well, the people who run these are all good people, right? They all work hard. They were like, yeah, no, we're here to save the country. And then you can see Nigel Farage basically throwing it away. And he's constantly taking them for granted. He's constantly treating them badly. And he's like, for example, the guy in Clacton, right? Nigel Farage was going to swan off to America and help Donald Trump with his presidential campaign. And then a poll came back from Clacton that showed that Reform were on like 30%. And that meant that they were going to win. And so Farage was like, oh my God, I could finally get into Parliament, because he's been trying for 30 years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And there was a guy who was already slated for that. I can't even remember the guy's name now, right? But Farage promised him a series of, things that he would get if he gave up the seat. And so Farage took it off him, and he gave him none of those things. This guy, there was an article a few months ago, this guy complaining, well, hang on a second, I was promised this, that, and the other, and he's just given me nothing. He hasn't been paid for the reimbursement for the money I had to spend to book the seat, basically. And so it's just like, man, that is that's shit. And on the other hand, you've got Rupert Lowe, who every month donates his salary to a local charity in Great Yarmouth. It's like, come on, there is an authoritative, stewardly, aristocratic leadership on display, and then there is this kind of worm-like, slimy con artist leadership on display, and the Reform members can see it. They know who would be better and who would not. And so I think literally in the next couple of weeks, you're going to get entire branches of Reform defecting to Restore. I think you're going to see it very shortly.
Yeah, it takes, I'm kind of impatient when people purity spiral on stuff in practical politics. So it takes a lot for me to be like, wow, this guy's controlled opposition. He's screwing everything up. But man, when you look at what Farage has been doing for so long, how he systematically destroys anybody on the right who could possibly be a rival or even compete for attention within the same party, it just gets very hard to avoid the conclusion that he's in this for himself.
100%. And he's got such a trail of victims.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible.
Yes, and it's always the same modus operandi as well. Mm-hmm. What he does is personally smears them and then makes an allegation against them to destroy their political career. So
which he tried to Lowe.
Which he tried to do with Rupert Lowe. It was exactly the same template. You have committed some sort of crime, but also you're a man of bad character, right? And so no one, you don't want to associate with him. Oh yeah, no, avoid that person. Also, there's an investigation into him now. But Rupert Lowe just happens to be, Dan calls him Boomer Jesus. Like, he just happens to be whiter than white, right? He just happens to be. Because he's been in public life for a long time. So he was the manager, the owner of Southampton Football Club. He's had very, very successful business for a long time. He was a member of the Brexit Party. He was an MEP back in 2019. And then he's of course become a Reform MP. So for the last 30 years, he's been in public life, and he's had his ups and downs. There were times at Southampton Football Club, but he was really unpopular with the membership because he was, not managing it in a way they thought was good. So he's had his ups and downs, but he hasn't had any of these sleazy scandals. Yeah. He's married to the one woman for 40 years, and he has children and grandchildren with her. Whereas Farage has sleazy scandals, and so and the idea that he threatened to kill Zia Youssef. I mean, you forgot to attach the Giga Chad, Nigel, but he didn't, obviously. Right. He obviously didn't do that. And so the police investigation went nowhere. The sleaze allegations went nowhere. And so it was just like, right, okay, Nigel, that didn't work. This is your version of cancellation. And Rupert's profile was too big for you to just bury him with, because normally he would do it with some guy who was up and coming in the party, and he'd bury him and just tank his career. And this happened dozens of times over the course of Nigel's career. But Rupert was just too well liked, too widely known. He had too good a social media game, and he just happened to not have ever done anything wrong. It just happens to have been a good dude. And so the perfect guy on which to break Farage's career, basically. And honestly, there are so many people who want to see it at this point. I was always fairly ambivalent about it, but I'm just now like, I don't want to be governed by a villain, right? Because Farage comes off like a villain. If you go through the history and the way he's interacted with, and I've spoken to dozens of them, dozens of people who Farage has destroyed. And literally, I'd give you a list of Stephen Wolfe, Gerard Batten, Catherine Blakelock. I mean, you can go all the way back to Kilroy Silk, back in the 90s, right? Farage has really slimy, sleazy tactics, genuinely the tactics of a Tolkien-esque villain. And Rupert Lowe has just stuck his chin out and said, we're going to do the hard thing the right way for the right reasons. Who's with me? And everyone's like, yeah, I'm with you. I'm totally with you on this. And it's genuinely come down to a position of character. Farage kind of looks like a villain to me, and Rupert looks like the hero. And so I've decided, I know where I'm going. I'm not going to be just taken advantage of by Nigel Farage. Screw that guy. I've had enough.
Right. Yeah, this seems to be the real thing that people are taking away. There's almost this. Farage has all the bad parts of Trump without any of the good parts, because Trump will do this kind of stuff, but he's had a whole career before this, so you kind of understand when he says stuff. It's like, well, it's hyperbole. And the other thing is he's able to reconcile with people who were once rivals. I mean, look at him and Rubio, for example. Yeah. But Farage never does that. I mean, it's the enemies are always destroyed totally. They're personally discredited. It's this war of annihilation that's always waged against his own side. And the problem is, if you do that for long enough, eventually you're just left with nobody. Whereas with Lowe, there's this desperate sincerity to the whole thing, which I think really matches the stakes here. And that's something the Anglosphere has been missing for a very long time.
You're absolutely right. The sincerity of it is the important part. Because Farage doesn't come across as sincere. Not only does he flip-flop whenever it's convenient, whenever he feels like he's about to get a snide judgment from Beth Rigby or bloody Robert Peston or whoever the shitlib interviewing him is. Oh, no, I disavow them. Rupert Lowe is just like, well, I don't care. I sincerely believe what I believe. And Rupert Lowe's got the kind of incorporative leadership that Trump has, right? Trump created a giant tent. It's like, no, I own the right. And that means you're all my men. You're all coming with me. Farage should have done that. He shouldn't have a threat to the right. That shouldn't be possible. Right. Farage should have been like, no, you're all on my team now. I'm the leader. And he would have been. He was unironically going to be the leader of the right. And he decided, no, I kind of hate you all, actually.
Yeah. He brought this totally on himself.
Exactly.
He brought this totally on himself. And he kicked Lowe out for there's a speech going viral now on X there. Everybody's seen it where he kicked him out because of remigration. I mean, there it is. What more is there to say?
Absolutely. His hard line was, I won't send rapists and their families back to where they came from.
Then what good are you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm glad you're telling.
What are we doing here?
Why are you here then?
Right.
So yeah, it's nice to see this all coming about, and like I said, it's been carnage, right? It's been great fun. But what is really nice to see everyone on the same team, because everyone realizes the hour is late. But Renaud Camus tweeted something the other day that really resonated with me. And it was something along the lines of, it was by a French intellectual. It was something along the lines of, an Englishman's mind never works better than when it's almost too late. And that's so true. It's so true. Oh, yeah. It's almost too late. And I think everything's going really well.
Not quite. Yeah. Almost too late, but not quite.
Exactly.
Cometh the hour, cometh the man. And it seems like it's finally happening. Well, Carl, thank you so much. I mean, this has been really great, and I think we're all really excited. We're all pulling for the mother country here in America. Obviously, I don't even need to ask this. Where can people find you? But if you want to talk about some of the projects you got going on right now,
just Lotus Eaters. Just come over to Lotus Eaters. If you're in Britain, go to join Restore Britain, obviously. Just come and find me on Twitter if you need to, and I'm pretty active there. And I mean, fingers crossed everything goes well. We'll see how the chips fall, but we're going to give it our all. So don't know what else we can do.
We'll do everything we can to help you from here. And I hope at some point we do get to talk about Warhammer 40K, because as you know,
I would love to.
That's what I'm most passionate about. So maybe some future day on Grimdark. It's 100% real. I mean, this is what people don't understand. We'll talk on Grimdark Enlightenment about how it's all real. So thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Anytime.
One of the reasons that I talk so much about you have to build political power so subtly and slowly and everything else is because, unfortunately, the people are not what we want them to be. And especially on the right, there's just no will to power. They do not fight the same way the left fights. I wish they did, but they don't. This is a poll that just came out from YouGov. I'm not going to go over the specifics real quick, but I just want to talk about what these numbers show us. They were talking to Democrats and Republicans about what they think of certain terms. So decolonization, this is a term that Democrats love by 36 percentage points. Republicans are like, well, I don't like it too much, -8. Colonization, Democrats hate that term by -51. Republicans slightly favorable, +2. Assimilation, Democrats weakly favorite, +5, Republicans +25. Manifest destiny, Democrats hate that, -18. Republicans like it by 17 points. But then when you look at multiculturalism, even there, Republicans favor it by 2 points. Democrats favor it by 65 points. And then when you ask them questions about what do you think about making these territories states? So for DC, for Puerto Rico, Republicans are moderately against it, -9 for DC, -5 for Puerto Rico. For the Democrats, +54 for Washington, D.C., +53 for Puerto Rico. Republicans very moderately like the idea of making Greenland a state. They're not that opposed to making Canada like a state. Democrats monolithically opposed. What you see over and over again is there's no real safe red state because the type of people who are on the American right tend to be weak in terms of their moral certainty. They don't really believe they have a right to wield power. They don't really believe they're on the right side of history. They don't really break with the left's narrative that fundamentally this is about a path to equality, this is about justice, this is about overcoming the sins of what we did in the past and everything else. We're still fundamentally on the same track. It's just the people on the right are a little bit behind. Whereas the Democrats are actually ruthless when it comes to going after political power, whether it's redistricting, whether it's censoring people, whether it's throwing them in jail. And they'll do this in the name of protecting democracy. And there'll be no self-awareness whatsoever. And that's actually an advantage. Self-awareness is a fatal handicap in politics. The more hypocritical you are, the more self-righteous you are, the more unconscious you are about your own motivations, probably the stronger you are. And what we're here talking about, like, well, what are our first principles? What should we do in regard to this political system? Is it moral to participate in these things? They're just going automatically because they're clients of a system and they know where the rewards are coming from and they feel just about it. How do you oppose that? I mean, this is a critical problem for us on the right. And one of the reasons is because if you're on the right, almost by definition, the most important thing in your life is not politics. Probably not even politics to you guys watching this. Sometimes I wonder if it's even the most important thing to me, because it'll be what? It'll be your family, it'll be your church, it'll be your friends, it might be your hobbies, it might be sports, it might be money, it might be any of these things. I mean, Curtis Yarvin has that quote where he says, Republicans care about alcohol the way a wine snob cares about alcohol. Republicans care about power the way wine snobs care about alcohol. Democrats care about power the way an alcoholic cares about alcohol. Who do you think's going to win there? They're willing to do whatever it takes. So fundamentally, if we are serious about winning this thing, it's probably going to come from the top down. It's probably going to come from somebody who is in a position of authority saying, we are going to set up the society where if you don't really care about politics, you get to live your life. You get to be left alone. You get to have a little corner of things that you care about, but don't mess with the political system because if you do, we'll crush you. I mean, this is basically what Bukele has set up, right? If you want to look at a maybe even more confrontational model, it was basically what Pinochet did in Chile and gave that country a decade of prosperity. But the problem is when it comes to the people who are fundamentally driven by resentment, fundamentally driven by neurosis, fundamentally driven by this furious anger that can never be satisfied no matter what you do, almost by definition, those people are going to be on the left. And those people are the people who get the most power in a democracy. And that is fundamentally why, under this political system, we're basically doomed to a long, slow decline. And yet, the only way out of it is to somehow commandeer the system and use it to change the system from the top down, to basically wage a coup against the system itself from the system. Because otherwise, what you're basically saying is, we need right-wingers who are going to act like leftists. We need right-wingers who are going to be like communist guerrillas or anarchists who are just going to selflessly dedicate themselves to this impossible ideal, and that's just not who our people are. Let's not forget what it is that we're fighting for. We're fighting for normal people to have a good life in a society that they can pass on to their descendants. We're fighting for the continuance of Western civilization and really for any kind of civilization and a higher state of existence beyond that of the slum. But that means we have to accept our people for what they are. These are not people with nothing to lose. These are not people who are driven fundamentally by resentment. These are good people who want to live in a decent, safe society. But unfortunately, they are not the people who can guarantee that such a society will be created. That's just up to people like you and me. We'll see you next time. All right, guys, that's it for today's episode of Identity Politics. If you found this valuable and you want to see more of this kind of work, here's how you can help. First, follow the show and share it with people who need to hear it. We're on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, X, TikTok, and you can also grab the RSS feed. Sharing it is the fastest way for us to grow. Second, sign up for our email list so we can always stay in direct contact no matter what the platforms decide. And most importantly, if you believe in our mission and want to keep it going, please consider supporting us on Ko-Fi. You can donate once or subscribe at the bronze, silver, gold, or white level. Every contribution, big or small, helps keep Identity Politics independent and alive. All the links are in the description below. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting. We'll see you next time.